Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Throwback Thursdays with Big E. Man, I feel like I gotta come up with a better title. So anyway, in my last video I talked about some things from my elementary school years, which may or may not have been somewhat boring. So for this video, we're going to be moving on up the ladder and spicing things up a bit by jumping right into middle school. The 2 years that, well, you can be the judge of that, but trust me, there was something. So without further ado, let the drama begin. So to start this off, these first few memories are all related to each other because they all involved one thing. Guys never leaving me alone. Now, I wasn't seriously bullied or harassed or anything like that. The guys, they were just annoying me a lot and teasing me sometimes too. But they wouldn't stop no matter how many times I told them to, and it always drove me nuts. In a nutshell, I got constant attention from them, and I did not like that one little bit whatsoever. So what is it that they actually did? Well, let me tell you about the big one that happened. So in my middle school, each morning, the vice principal would announce students' birthdays, if there were any. And if a student's birthday was on a weekend, it was usually announced on a Friday or a Monday. Now in 7th grade, my birthday was announced 2 months early. Somehow my school had the date written wrong. And that day, a bunch of my classmates, mainly the guys, would say happy birthday to me all the time. And I would politely say that it wasn't my birthday, that the school made a mistake, stuff like that. Now, of course, on my way to my first class, I actually went to the vice principal and I told him my real birthday. So that essentially fixed the whole birthday date conundrum. But that didn't fix what was to come. Oh no, that day was the day that started everything. Now, after that day, I thought that things would go back to normal, but oh no, you'd be wrong right there. Those guys, they kept saying happy birthday to me the next day, and the next day, and the next day,
and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day.
At this point, the guys probably thought they were being funny, but I did not find it funny whatsoever. I found it annoying and I was frustrated with them. I would always have to tell them to stop or to leave me alone, but they never listened. It drove me nuts. I honestly felt like a pistachio by then.
Bruh.
Yeah, bad pun there. I'm sorry about that. But there was never one day where I could catch a break. There was always at least one guy in every single one of my classes who would have to happy birthday to me as soon as I walked in the classroom. I was just beside myself. Now, after 7th grade was over and summer came, I honestly thought that 8th grade would be different. I thought that the guys would forget and drop the act. But boy, was I wrong. They started it up again on the first day of classes. And at this point I was like, oh great, here we go again. Now, by this point, I was used to the whole thing, but that doesn't mean I wasn't bothered by it at all. I was still just as bothered by that as I was when it first started. And this whole thing went on to the very last day of school, and after that, I was like, thank goodness this is over. I was going to an all-girls high school after this, so I did not have to worry about those guys bothering me with this. Thank God. Now, the next thing that the guys did was constantly asking me for help. Now, here's the thing. It's one thing when someone asks me for help on something that they are struggling with and I'm not struggling with, But it's another thing when someone asks me a question and I know that they know the answer or that they are able to figure it out by themselves. Now, the guys knew that I was a good student, I had good grades, and I was the kind of person who was more than willing to help if somebody needed it. But the guys, they always asked me for help, mainly in my math and Spanish classes. And some of the things that they asked for help on were fairly simple things that I knew they knew, or at least should have known by now, or they could figure it out by themselves. As annoying as this situation was, and as annoyed as I was, I still helped them out anyway. I mean, I didn't want to be seen as the bad guy by other students around me because I refused to help them. But plus, helping people is just in my nature. I mean, were the guys taking advantage of my smarts? Well, it's possible, but then again, I wasn't really bothered by this. I was just more annoyed than anything else. Plus, the same guys who kept asking me for help are the same ones that kept saying happy birthday to me all the time, so that kind of made it even more irritating for me. Ay vey. So, the happy birthday thing and the constant help were the main things that the guys would do. But let me tell you about something else that happened, which was only a temporary thing, but I did not find this funny at all one little bit. So this story had to do with how I said my friend's name. Her name was Laura, by the way. Now, there was one day in 8th grade, I was in the hallway and a couple of guys walked up to me and they said, Laura, Laura, as if that's how I said her name. And I'm like, that's not how I say her name. I mean, this went on for a few days at most, but still, that's like, why? Was I bothered by this? Yes, but what was worse was that those same guys would say the same thing to Laura herself. When she told me about this, I felt so bad. But Laura knew the situation I was in with the guys, so she never blamed me at all for what had happened. Thankfully, this thing only happened for a few days, but to have the nerve to do the same thing to a friend of mine, like, really? What were those guys even thinking? I mean, were they thinking about how this could have affected her? Probably not. Or maybe they probably thought that she'd be okay with it. No, she clearly wasn't. Well, that's enough chit-chat about the guy drama for today, so let's move on to something else, shall we? So in my last video, I talked about winning a contest I didn't think I would, and in 8th grade, I won another contest. So in my middle school, we had yearbook cover contests, where the students would design both the front and the back covers of our yearbooks. Now, of course, we were given certain criteria, and once all of our submissions were in, the faculty would pick the best designs, one for the front cover and one for the back cover. Now, in 7th grade, I wanted to submit a design, but I didn't finish it before the deadline. And then in 8th grade, my brain was on design overload. I designed not one, but 8 possible covers. Now, I could only submit one, so I submitted the best design that I had, and that turned out to be the front cover of the yearbook that year. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to go back to the guy drama, but the day we got our yearbooks, the guys saw my name on the front cover and they cheered. I just wanted to get away from that. Inside, there was only one thing I wanted to do.
Run.
Yeah, that was too much attention. Ay vey. Now, going back to 7th grade for a bit, there was something interesting that happened that year. Now, my birthday fell during midterm week both years of middle school, but in 7th grade, my birthday wasn't an ordinary midterm day. So, we had two midterms scheduled that day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Everything was fine in the morning for our first midterm, but somewhere in between the first and second midterm, the school boiler/heater broke, so we were losing heat in the building. We still had to continue with our second midterm, so some of the teachers, they said to the students to, go grab their coats from their lockers and bring them into the assigned classrooms for the midterms. There were some teachers who even had space heaters with them. So we carried on the day as normal, and by the end of the day, we found out that because of the boiler heater situation, school would be closed the next day. And I was happy to hear that. That meant that I did not have to study for the next midterm on my birthday. By the way, the next midterm was pushed to the following Monday. I mean, what a way to start off the teen years. Am I right? Now, I wanted to talk about some more things that happened in middle school, like our class trip to DC, the middle school dances, the time I was in a school musical, but I already feel like this video is getting long enough as it is, so we're just gonna jump right into the most interesting and possibly the most savage thing I have ever done whilst in middle school, if not my whole life. My school life, that is. I didn't take a test, and I got away with it. Now, for the record, this happened unintentionally, but you probably are thinking to yourselves, how is that even possible? Wouldn't a teacher notice if you got away with not taking a test? Also, how can something like this be unintentional? Well, in my situation, there somehow was a loophole, so let me explain the story. So in 7th grade, the week before our Christmas break, my family and I were on vacation. And during that same week, there was a history test. And I knew ahead of time that I was going to miss that test and I would have to make it up when I came back. Now, when I came back from vacation, there were a couple of days before our Christmas break started. And my teacher and I made arrangements for me to take the test during lunch the day before break started. Now, despite the fact that I studied for the test, nerves got to me and I felt like I wasn't completely 100% ready for the test. But instead of going to the teacher and being like, hey, I don't feel ready to take the test, can we change the date to after break? Somehow my mind thought it was a good idea to just hide in the crowd of students going to lunch while passing by my teacher's classroom in hopes that he wouldn't see me. What was I thinking? I honestly don't know. But after lunch that day, the school decided to have a middle school dance in the gym. Don't ask me why, I honestly don't know. But there were 2 hours left in the school day anyway, so okay. And while I was dancing, having a good time, chit-chatting with my friends, my teacher finds me, taps me on the shoulder, and he was like, did you take the test? And I was like, no. And he said, well, when are you going to take it? And I was like, can I take it after break? And he was like, okay. And we just went on to minding our own business for the rest of the day. Now, after break was over, I was ready to take the test, but my teacher never said anything about it to me. And because midterms were coming up the next week, all the teachers were focused on preparing for that, which is probably why my teacher never said anything about the test. And it's also the reason why I never mentioned anything, because me and the other students were also in pre-midterm mode. Now, of course, after midterms, we had to keep moving forward with everything, so the test was never brought up again. And that's the story of how I unintentionally got away with not taking a test. That was just so savage. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to more of my stories. Stay tuned for the next episode of Throwback Thursdays. And if you guys have any story suggestions, feel free to let me know in the comments. Who knows, there's bound to be some more things that happened that were pretty savage. And until next time, bye!